The things that you'll probably get out of today's session would be centered around things of building some of your own tools and then being able to own your own inference, if you will. And then to be able to take things like that are practical now, such as your token budget and how to think about that and how you might approach solving a particular problem with
GTM AI Podcast with Jonathan Moss and Coach K, where you get the latest with AI and GTM today. GTM AI Podcast with Jonathan.
All right, everyone, welcome to the GTM and AI Podcast, where we show you how real operators are using AI across their business. This is not just theory or strategy. They actually show the receipts and the impact. So the way we think about this is that we're putting people in the kitchen and we only have one role. You actually have to cook. So our guests are going to show you exactly what they've built, why they built it, go through their trials and tribulations. And the reason that we do it this way is because there are a million places to go where someone says, AI changed my business or AI changed my go-to-market, but they don't give you anything you can actually use. So that's a keynote speech. That's not actually putting it into practice. So we're going to put someone in the kitchen today. We're going to hand them the mic and say, show us exactly what you made and how you made it, the mess, the process, and the things that actually work. So today's chef is Mr. John Williams. Welcome to the show, John. How you doing?
All right, I'm doing great. It's glad to be here, Jonathan.
We're glad to have you, man. And he's not here to inspire y'all. He's here to show you exactly what he does and how he did. John, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about you and what they'll get from watching this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. I have been a GTM operator for a couple of decades and have been doing this as an independent operator for the past 5 years, right? So helping customers who were not needing a full-time GTM operator, but did need somebody to get in there and rearrange things. And boy, has it been busy with the changes that we've seen from AI. So the things that you'll probably get out of today's session would be centered around things of building some of your own tools and then being able to own your own inference, if you will. And then to be able to take things like that are practical now, such as your token budget and how to think about that and how you might approach solving a particular problem with an agent swarm versus maybe a single one-on-one chat, right? So you're thinking about your token economics, if you will. And so that should give you a good kickstart of what we'll get out of today.
Love it. Love it. We're excited to dive in. I'm excited to have you here with us, and we're gonna talk about some really amazing things. Let's dive into it. So John's going to pull up. He's going to show you some things that he's built, and we're going to guide the conversation from there and talk a lot about his journey, what he did, what impact, and even, like you said, some interesting things about local inference versus models, and also privacy and other things that I'm sure top all your all's mind.
Yeah. And hopefully you can see my screen. Yeah. So one of the things, if you're not already familiar with GitHub, is that this is like your public validation of the capabilities that you have in terms of building tools or leveraging the technical side of your stack. So this is pretty much not exposing your stack to the world, but in a way you are letting everyone know firsthand, hey, here's what I'm working on. I think that what we're seeing as compared to the past is we're seeing more and more operators build in public, right? And this is a great way to showcase the work that you've done. And in fact, when I have the outreach from my network where someone's saying, hey, I'm available to do a few projects and I haven't met this person yet, and they're introducing themselves, one of my first questions is, would you share your GitHub repo link with me just so I can take a look and see what they've been up to? So if you're not part of the GitHub community yet, I would encourage you to explore that. Let that be the next learning lesson for you this week so that you can then begin showcasing your work. And in this case, what we're looking at on the screen here is a few projects that we've been working on. And these are notably around, I'll show you Chat Archive because it's an operator tool. I had to build this tool for myself. And then also an AI acceptable use policy, which is an open specification that is being used, and agent commerce as well as an open specification. And maybe I could just spend 2 seconds on those. So we got so far ahead of our enablements in our companies in terms of the teams that are responsible for keeping us up to date, just completely got overran by shadow AI, right? And generally, you don't want to just rush out enablement. You really want that to be meaningful for the company. And so we needed to have a base layer of information that the company could at least start from something other than zero. So these are some super core tenets that can be adapted to any customer situation. And it allows the enablement teams and learning and development and human resources teams to then be able to help the company embrace AI in a responsible way without being overly restrictive or just letting shadow AI run the show, which can be a little dangerous, right? We've built that in public, and we did that through a combination of a couple of different models, notably Groq and then Claude's Opus were contributors to that. And you'll see them listed as an author in there. I think that's important too. And then in agent commerce, this is about if you are deploying agents on your behalf to go perform research or actually to conduct transactions. So let's think of some research that you may need to pay for, right? How do you instruct your agent of what terms and conditions it can say okay to without your involvement? And then how much money can it spend on its own without having to come back and get permission for you? So these are like some agent guardrails that you can bake in for your agents who are going out and performing work on your behalf, which might involve spending money or agreeing to some type of terms and conditions. And then on the other side of that is if you have intellectual property that you can provide through a channel, then this is a great way for you to expose that to those agents who are coming and they're trying to perform tasks for the humans or other agents that sent them out to achieve this goal. And so what terms do you have? What forms of payment do you accept? How do you charge for the information? All of this can be codified into a language that the agent can understand, and then it can check itself to see if it's okay to agree to this, and then the transaction completes. So this is not about a payment system, so you can use the existing payment rails that are available in market. This is just about the rules of the transaction and actually opening up the transaction to occur in an agentic flow. So that was another big open source that we're working on. And moving into Chat Archive as an operator.
Before we do that, so I think this is important. I want to just reemphasize a few things you said. So one is building in public. I think that's been great because one of the things that we were actually just chatting about before we jumped in was how much is out there for people to find when they're using tools like Claude Code or other things that others have built that they can leverage for themselves. And we're talking about some of the things that we've built and how much we've leveraged GitHub repos and things from other builders. So love the fact that you're building in public, and so many others are as well, because it's just helping us advance so at such a rapid pace, especially with this technology the way that it is. Second thing you mentioned was if you're out there and you don't have a GitHub repo, set one up. Hey, what's your GitHub repo? The other thing, I'll tell you something that I learned very early on was I had two computers. I had a Mac Mini and I had a laptop. And I was going back and forth because I would like travel and things like that. And my files, my stuff that I built got out of sync because dumb me was using iCloud to try to sync things back and forth. And it got out of sync and it went into this like death loop. It took me 2 days to figure out how to get this thing out of a death loop because it was just updating files and it wouldn't like let me do anything. So get you a GitHub repo, store some things there. You can make them private. And that way, in case you're using multiple computers or things like that, you can obviously stay in sync. And I love what you said about privacy. We're going to talk about that here in just a little bit as we go through what you're building. But I love that you've got a policy. Make sure if you're out there listening, check that out because it is important. As agents become teammates, as they have access to things like proprietary information or your personal information or other things, ensuring that you have appropriate guardrails, the right security in place is super critical, even for you personally. This is not just a company thing. Of course, you've got to have it at a company, but even you personally using it, it's super critical. So we just wanted to hit those three things I think that you landed really well on.
Yeah. And again, just we're moving so quickly. And I think that's what forces us into this conversation, right? We probably would have chosen a slower pace, but we didn't get to make that choice. Okay. And so looking at Chat Archive as an operator, I've got conversations that really span across Gemini and ChatGPT and Groq, as well as Claude, right? And so one of the things that I was struggling with was, how do I make this information portable, right? So that I can take selected points of a conversation and expound on that in a different model, or even if it's in the same model, we eventually run out of context within a given chat conversation. And so I want the ability to be able to archive the conversation and then reference back to it. So a couple of years ago, Jonathan, we would just manually cut and paste the HTML and then run a little Python script to separate out what was I saying as the user, what was the model responding with as the assistant, and then some hocus pocus, and it builds the file, and it worked, right? But it was just not something that it required you to do manual things, right? And it was not pleasant. So we knew that there needed to be a better way to do that. And one of the things we thought of is the browser is the interface primarily for all of the user interface motion for modern models. So why don't we build an extension, because we're already in that tool? And that was one of the first ones that we did. And it's still in development. If you want to contribute to this, it's an open project. In fact, Nathan Spear out of the Pacific Northwest has actually built on the base layer of Chat Archive to add Perplexity and also bulk exporting. So he's done a great job of that. And I want to say I didn't get here by myself. I completely started, if you're still looking at your screen, you can see Jaron at Trifall had a chat export, and it was a really solid piece of work. And the thing I was looking for, and this is what he was hitting on, was that none of this makes any outbound inference calls. Everything stays local on your machine. So when you're actually saving the chat, there's not an external call. Nothing leaves your environment. So again, that kind of comes back to me. Just one of the core tenets that I have is, if we can make it private, then that's the incentive. Let's make it private so that you are the information owner and you can select what you want to do with it. So my shout out to Jaron at Trifall, who had a really unique way to capture this information. So as you're scrolling through your chat conversation, you can see both for you and also for the assistant or the model that you can copy the prompt and the response, little icons. And so that was his cool little trick of saying, why don't we just use what's already there and use that to record the conversation versus trying to sort through all of these nested div objects that get complex in the technical side of things, right? And yay, that worked really well. So I wanted to let you know that was the reason why we wanted to build this, was so that we could then archive our own chats. For me, I also am trying to build my history, right? So my conversational history over the past year, where I've had access to generative models, because there's some things I'm actually learning about myself. And once you have this really large data stream that any model can look at, and they do a great job of seeing patterns, then it can start letting me know, hey, here's some really cool things that you are thinking about, that you're working on. I think that they relate back over to this, and this may lead you into an area that you haven't considered yet, right? And we try to do our best as organic LLMs to remember to do all of the right things and to pursue our interest. But we do forget. We do lose our own context. Life gets in the way, and maybe it's just a path you didn't take because the water went under the bridge and you are not going to see that again. So this helps me to hold on to that long-term context flow for myself. And we talked about building our own tools. So this is part of a longer project that I'm working on in building that repository that would pretty much be a digital twin of myself that I can just basically not forget things and be able to come back to the things that interest me. At the end of the day, Jonathan, if we can do everything, if there's nothing that would prevent us from doing anything, then where would we spend our time? Where would we choose to spend the time that we have here on doing the things that interest us the most? So big tool there.
Yeah. So a couple of things I'd love to dive into before you go further. So one is we've always had this portable info problem, portable context, et cetera, where maybe I don't want to be stuck with one model. And we've seen Anthropic release like the portable memory, which is these models are starting to try to do some things. But ultimately, I think it's important to reemphasize this solves a pretty important and impactful problem, which is memory and context are super critical as you're continuing to use the models or as you're trying to fine tune your own workflows and not having to repeat yourself or retraining a thread or the AI just knows you better. And so I love the fact that you've built this to solve that, because as you just like with any tool or anything that you use, as the more that you use it, the better it should become and the more personalized it should become. And without continuing to have that memory and context, it's not going to. It's almost like you start from a blank slate every single time. And so having that is super critical for anyone who's listening. If you're just starting your journey, or if you're far along your journey, you're like, man, why do I have to cut and copy and paste these prompts? Or why am I having to do all these things over and over again? It's because you don't have memory and context, and that solves so many of the challenges. So I love the fact that this tool is doing that. I would love to ask you a question on the local models. Can you just double click a little bit on that? Why? Obviously, there's a token consumption challenge and a context challenge that you're trying to solve, but are there other things and other reasons why you feel that setting up your own local model is a way to go? Or are there certain use cases you should and should? Tell us a little bit about how you think about local models since you've set those up.
Yeah. And as we continue to evolve as GTM operators, I think the expectation will grow that when we arrive at a situation, so whether that's our next FTE role or if you're an independent operator, you're expected to bring some of your own tool stack with you, right? Just we're in that part of the execution curve where it's not just the company that you're helping. It's not just their tool stack, right? Just in the same way that an HVAC mechanic shows up with a toolbox to perform work at your house, or an automotive technician has their own tools that they bring to a shop when they are performing their work, we'll do the same thing. And local models are a great way for you to build your own tools, but maybe more importantly, it's how to develop your craft, right? In your learning journey, you want to move past being a prompt jockey. We will not likely escape that. But what I'm saying is that if you have a model on your own computer, and there are some great small models that are very effective. So if you don't have a super powerful computer, that's not the barrier it was a year ago, right? So some of these super small models fit well in memory, and you can have these conversations, and the conversations usually go along the lines of a learning path where you're learning something else. And there's the real shock, the privacy. And so when we are using a cloud hosted model, we can all agree that's just not contained. It may be very well protected, but it's not contained. And when you're working on your own laptop, not even connected to the internet, and still you are doing local inference, then that is like a level of independence that you have that helps you think through how to solve problems on your own. And when I say on your own, you're working with your chosen model, but it doesn't know the intent of what you're doing, even with a well-crafted prompt. There have been several aha moments along all of these projects where, as a human, you sit back and go, does it really make sense that we're headed down this path? Why wouldn't we just choose to do it this way? Is it possible to do it like this? And the model responds with, yeah, actually that actually is a way better path for us to pursue. Or it may say, that's good thinking, but the reason that doesn't fit well is because of this. And it is really good at helping you to kind of think about this, which then compounds that learning into the next project that you're working on. You're already thinking ahead in time of, okay, here's how I'm thinking about it. What is a contrasting view here? Is this the way I should do it? How should I ask the question to determine that this is a good starting point, right? And so I think that learning compounds. And for me, it's really about token authority, because we've seen a little bit in the news in March where we're starting to witness some of the GPU brownouts out there. The reality of the situation is only so much processing power that we have in the current time, because these GPUs were purchased 2 years ago and installed in data centers. And here's the demand that is just absolutely incoming. Think of all the agentic workflows that have been spun up in the past 30 days. That token demand wasn't there back earlier in the year, but it's there now. And so we need a mechanism to be able to have core token processing authority, just in case the internet is suffering a GPU brownout, or there's just some heavy workload periods and you still need to get work done. I think having that token authority locally is a good redundant path, and you just can't talk about it. You have to play with it and do it. And that way you're more confident in what can be done locally. So let me pause for a second. I know that was a lot.
Yeah. But I think it's good info, because Claude's had problems. I use Claude almost every day, and it's had outage problems and things like that. And I feel like I'm like losing my mind for a day because I can't use it. It helps me so much every single day. And I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? To your point is, if you've got the local model inference just running on your machine, so you can continue to get the work done. I also think, to your point on token consumption, as we continue to run agents or build more agents or get more agentic workflows happening, obviously that's a cost. They use a lot of tokens and there's a high cost to that. And so being able to also run it locally also saves you a lot of ways to do that as well. The same way that think about sometimes switching models, like maybe have a Sonnet, for example, a Claude Sonnet, since it's a lower cost model, do your planning, but then have Opus, which is a higher cost model, more complex model, do the actual building. That's a way to help with some of your offset your costs. But if you go private and local, a lot of those costs almost come to zero. So it's just a way to be able to control a lot of different things. So thanks for walking through that. Love to see. I know we started talking about some of these things that are important, which are super critical. We'll love to see what you built here with Chat Archive.
Sure, let's do it. So I'll go over to a recent Claude conversation, and you can see that these are some of the projects that we've been working on. Most recently, I've been I'm self-training a small model to build SVG business graphics that I'll use in my own control tower, but no one has built a small model that's really good at doing that. And so that's something that we're working on, right? And so you could see that I've got the history here that's quite technical. And if I want to save that, I'm going to go in here to my extensions. This is Edge, and it's based on Chromium. Both Chrome and Edge are Chromium browsers. And you'll see that I've got this Chat Archive here. And what will happen is sometimes when I load this extension, I actually need to refresh the page that I'm on, because then this is how the extension has access to the DOM. And so didn't require that on this one. And it just already knows, hey, this looks like Claude AI. It's inferring that from the URL at the top of the page. So it kind of knows, okay, here's how Claude's conversation goes. How do you want to export that? And do you want that in JavaScript object notation or markdown file, right? Or both. And so let's just say we want to do an export in JSON. You can see it actually scrolling through the conversation, and it's grabbing all of the terms. So a term is between the user and assistant. So it's grabbing all of that information and then in memory, writing it to a JSON file that then it will save on your local hard drive. So again, it's not inferring out. And I'll tell you this too, when we look at the markdown version of this, In the projects that I am working on, Jonathan, I kind of have a master markdown file that after each one of these sessions, I update this master markdown file of what did I get done against what I was hoping to get done. And I use this markdown file in all of my projects. In ChatGPT and in Claude, you have this concept of a project where, they're related conversations. And you can see here, I've got this thing called ecosystem provenance. It's a markdown file, but it's all the work that I do across not just FX Ops AI, but also be fractional, where we teach other fractional operators how to be successful in their practice. So it keeps all of this content together so I don't forget, but also that the model is informed. The files that we have downloaded, I don't need all of that content in there, but I obviously need to give it permission to save here. But then what will happen next is the system remembers the context in which we were talking. And so I'm just going to open this JSON file real quick, and I use VS Code, and you can see quite busy little fellow over there. But here's what that just created. So you can actually see that, hey, it remembers the URL of where I was. It remembers the time. It can estimate the turn in between. So it was like, when was I talking about this? How does that relate over here to that? And so the whole point is that we could then come in at a different inference engine. Like maybe we go over to Groq or something. Let me see if I can find Groq real quick. And I'll just start a new conversation with Groq. And then I will upload what we just downloaded. So Groq at this point has no idea of the conversation I've just had with Claude in here. And so I'm going to say, hey, I want to do this attachment, 152 KB. So not this ginormous, crazy file. And then I'll just say, hey, Groq, can you summarize this? Not the world's greatest typer.
It's also hard sometimes when you're in the midst of, trying to do it live. It's hard to can actually type. By the way, which also comes down to one of the things I do a lot, which I'm sure you've heard too, is I think I've gotten more and more where I'm doing more audio and talking than I am typing anymore. So I'm trying to save my wrist and carpal tunnel, but not also just super, super fast and quick. So for those of you that also are doing more typing, you should check out some of the either native capabilities, like you can see down here, Groq actually has ability to do that, or there's also other ways like Whisperflow or Willow or things too. So some cool things to look at.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Jonathan. I always forget. I'm stuck in my old brain. Now, Groq actually knows what we were talking about over here. It knows what work has been done, what is the work that's trying to get done, and we can start picking up the conversation, right? So right now it's basically saying, hey, this is where you were at the end of the chat. It actually did do this overnight run last night. I haven't even looked at the data yet, but now I can begin having a conversation with Groq, and it is as informed as Claude was in this contextual conversation. That was a great example of data portability, right? Of who owns this. And obviously as users, we would argue that we own it, but I would also state for the record that possession is 9/10 of the law. And if you can't access it, then perhaps you don't own it. And so this just allows you to really make the statement of information authority, right? That you are retaining the information that you have to use for what purpose that you deem fit in an environment that you want. And obviously, as the companies who have invested so much money into this, and I'm not dinging Claude, they deserve to get paid for the great work that they perform. We all know that inference costs for them are actually way more than they earn on their subscription. So they're losing money every time we use their service. And that just doesn't go on forever, right? So we know that there's going to be some rebalancing that occurs, and we should expect that. And I think at that point, we now start prioritizing token efficiency. What do I need to work on here? Can I archive that or batch that at a lower cost token processing? And I was thinking about this too, Jonathan, is as we are taking more work that was done by humans, and I'm not talking about creative and strong mind stuff, I'm talking about copying values from one spreadsheet to another, things that probably weren't the greatest use of human intellect. The cost to do that, where we maybe previously we paid the W-2 of a human to do this necessary thing for the business, that cost didn't really go away, right? It just transferred from a W-2 to an inference provider, right? So we just moved that over a little bit. And I think that's something important that we need to consider as we come back to, hey, if you could do the things you wanted to do, not copying values from one spreadsheet to another, what would you like to do? Right. And I think that's where the argument is made that we're not really losing humans out of the workforce. We're just redirecting the outputs from the human to something that potentially could be better for mankind. Right.
I completely agree on this. And funny, so I have a lot of conversations around this and try to post as much as I can. I actually got an article coming out this week specific on this, where I think the headlines in the media, obviously we have to remember, just like social, just like media, they're trying to get clicks because that's how they get paid. And so thinking of all this doomerism, if you will, but honestly, if you really pull back the data on the jobs and the human capabilities and what's happening is, I think there's a lot of things there. And then I'll get off this soapbox and we'll go back because I have a couple of questions to this. But ultimately, in every technology platform shift that we've had across human mankind, it has produced more jobs than it has lost, number one. And you have to ask the question number two, which is, should a human actually be doing this job anyway? Should a human be doing calls? If you think about there used to be people that were switchboard operators that would take a plug and plug it into there. There used to be people that were lamplighters before electricity. Is that really what we would want the human? We're complex creatures. We're creative. We're smart. We're intelligent. Is that what we really want people spending their brain capacity and cognitive loads on, is switching boards and lighting lamp? No. Making calls? No. We want them to be able to use their abilities, and AI is just going to help us be able to do that, because we have over time, software has actually created a lot of jobs that probably shouldn't necessarily have been there. But now with AI, I think we'll elevate that. So I appreciate you saying that, because I think that's a super, super important point. A question on portable. Can you just share a couple of use cases? I love the fact that you can port it over again. And I think that's super critical to kind of keep context and be able to migrate your own data places. But tell us a little bit about why you would do that. What are some, for business folks that are listening or go-to-market operators, why is this important? Number one. I think number two is, how would you talked about private LLMs. So then how do you ensure, if someone were to set that up, that they would also be able to have this kind of portability?
Yeah, definitely. And remember that this is a browser-based tool. So if I'm using a browser interface for Ollama to access a local model like Gemini or Mistral or Llama, right? It's the same gravity. In other words, I'm using the browser to access the engagement with the inference model, and then I'm saving that conversation, right? So I'm not just leaving the trust of, hey, I hope you saved our conversations and the files don't get corrupted, because I want to come back and search for that thing we talked about 2 months ago, right? It's another layer of kind of added security, right? There are regulated industries that would require a degree of audit. And so even though we are maintaining a very private conversation, this may have had something to do with financial stewardship, right? And I may need to be able to provide the original files of the inference as an audit to show I was acting in my client's best faith. And I can demonstrate that here with the raw data. So this would be very similar to, did you preserve the videotapes or not tapes anymore, but the video recordings of the people entering and exiting your business, right? And there's an aspect of the audit factor, but I think probably the largest gravitational pull here is just that you're retaining that latent intelligence, right? And that intelligence doesn't have to live inside the conversation that you had with the model. It can be its own endpoint. And when you put these different nodes together, like we talked about earlier, it produces a pretty nice fabric of information that's represented as intelligence. So it's a tool for us to get to federated intelligence under our terms, though. It's not someone else's privacy policy or terms and conditions. We set all of that. And those are some primary reasons why I could see that someone could use it to migrate between providers or models. So if I take a conversation, it's a little frustrating. If I start an Opus, I can't midstream switch to Sonnet without losing it. So this is a way that
That's something that should be easily. And I'm not really sure why they're like even a thing still, but anyway.
And I'll say in the open model community, Ollama will absolutely allow you, while you're typing turn to turn, you can change the model that you want for the next turn, and it doesn't lose the context of what's been said so far. So that's an interesting thing for open source. If any of you are out there playing around with that. And in this example, it would be the equivalent of switching between Opus and Sonnet without losing anything, right? On the open source side of it. Anyway, I just wanted to come back and say that the reasons why this is powerful is because we're making a statement that you are a participant and owner of the data. And so this gives you a chance to claim that ownership, right? And use it to either build an intelligence knowledge graph from your cumulative conversations across many models, many providers, or if you just need to mechanically shift gears and move between things. It's just a rough and tumble way to do it. There's probably a much more elegant way to do it. But today, this is saying yes instead of no or maybe.
Love it. And so question for me, we chat about this as well, and then we'll get into like, where can they find this? Is it open? Things like that. But why don't I just install OpenClaw and have it do all this stuff for me? Why would I not just go do that? Tell me a little bit.
Okay. And let me say that I have much respect for the developer of OpenClaw. What a cool project. And one of the things we have to really be careful of is that not everything in the world is good. There are some people out there with bad intentions. And this is no different. This area of the world is no different. And so you want to use caution and care when you are using open source or openly available tools, right? One of the ways that you can feel a little more protected here is that you'll actually ask your model, is this safe? Can you look at the repo for me? Can you flag any of the information security risks before you even get there, right? So I would encourage you to do that. But with OpenClaw, you have the ability to turn over some of the things that you would normally want to approve, but because you've trained the model, it's learned you a little bit, it knows what it can go do on your behalf. It can go open a file, read a file. It can write contents to another file. In some cases, it can log in as you and perform work as if you were the human operator doing the work. In other cases, it can actually, if you grant it the permission, it can then go and perform other work, such as buying things, committing you legally to things. And so that's why you really want to take care in using it. But at the end of the day, it is a collection of agent activity that is there to benefit you and to help you be 2 times yourself or 10 times yourself. We've always said, I wish I could be in 2 places at once. And this is a little bit of the realization of being able to do that. We have our hands in different client projects, in different work that we're doing. I've got my own private work that I'm doing here. And really, the concept of an OpenClaw is something that allows that to even happen, because me as the limiter would just move at a much slower pace in trying to do all of these things. Whereas by having this additional help, it's feasible and plausible and actual that I can go pursue these various interests and be good at all of them, right? I want to encourage you to look at it this way, but just again, trust but verify and ask yourself, would my security director approve of my use of this tool? And if the answer is maybe or not sure, then give yourself a second look at that and just feel confident moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. Us chatting, I mentioned as I've been building and doing things, like even just pointing Claude code at the repo and looking at it and just saying, what are some things that we should consider building ourselves? I'm not taking exactly, but taking the concept and having it understand what that code is trying to do and build it itself, I think is also a good way to do that. Because to your point, there's been the horror stories of API keys leaked and all this other stuff, and people doing prompt injecting in the skills of OpenClaw. So it's very important as you get into this, especially for those that don't have a deep security background or understand the code deeply or and what to look for and things like that, that you don't just like blindly walk into something without trying to have Claude Code look at it, try to understand it more, and try to make sure that you making those judgment calls. So John, where can we find you? Can people access this on GitHub and use it? Tell us a little bit about those things before we let you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And 100%. Probably the most interesting place to find stuff about me will be at the GitHub repo. So fxops-AI is a great place to start and find out information about me. I also spend time over on Hugging Face. So I've got a new repo that's up over there, and Hugging Face is really very open source inference modeling data sets, really very deep on tools and tool making. So I want to encourage you to check out huggingface.co, no M, just .co. And you'll find me over there as John Williams ATL. Obviously, those in Pavilion, you'll find me in the AI and GTM channel. And for the independent operators, consultants, fractionals, and advisors out there, you'll find Henning and I teaching Be Fractional course roughly every 6 weeks. It's a 5-week course, minimal impact on your week, each week to build up your independent practice there. Anyways, I love building in public. I think if I was to apply for my next FTE role, I would do the application in public. I wouldn't even go through the traditional HR route of submitting resumes and stuff. I would just apply for the job in public and document the application and possibly force the employer to go, wow, this is pretty cool. Check this out. And if they missed me because I was one of 1,000 applicants in the first hour, then at least the rest of the world knows how I might have approached that.
Awesome. I agree completely. We appreciate you building in public and appreciate you not only just being part of the channel, but also teaching in the AI go-to-market school. So appreciate you being a facilitator instructor there. And go check John out. Check out Chat Archive, use it. I appreciate you joining. And this has been an amazing show again. So thank you to the audience for always coming and learning with us. Check us out next week. We'll see you then.
Stay curious.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to the GTM AI Podcast. Please follow, subscribe, like, comment, and come back for more.